Greetings everyone, I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title up there, I am doing another movie review, and this is of Rob Zombie's latest film, his adaptation of the classic sitcom The Munsters, released direct to video and Netflix, which is how I watched it since I'm already subscribed. Now, before I get too far into the video, just a reminder, if you want to support the channel, both the Patreon and PayPal links are down below. If you want to continuously support the channel, subscribe to the Patreon. You'll gain access to videos like this early, and you'll also be able to suggest topics for future videos. And if you just want to do one-off support or a one-off request, go the PayPal route. Either way, your support is appreciated. Now, before I get too far into this video talking about how I felt Rob did with this film, I probably should preference by saying that when I was young, I did watch The Munsters, because it was one of those ones I did catch a lot in syndication, and it was one of the classic sitcoms that I did grow up with to a point, because, you know, there was like peaks and valleys depending on what channels were showing it in syndication. It was this show, Gilligan's Island, which was my big favorite one. Those two were pretty neck and neck, and so much so that I actually went out of my way at different points in my fandom of them to watch the spin-offs, with Gilligan's Island, of course, being the first TV movie. And with this one, it would be the reunion film that they did, and then the reboot film they did on Fox in the mid-90s. I never really watched The Munsters today. I didn't even know about that show until a couple years ago. Now, if you want to know how that show is, just listen to the updated theme show with the lyrics. I haven't watched the other spin-off film they did after the reboot film in the 90s, and Mockingbird Lane I haven't watched yet, but that one is a really darker take. That one just has some interest value for me, just for the fact you got Eddie Izzard playing the Count, which should be interesting. Of course, that seems to be a darker take on it. In case anyone's wondering what else was in that classic sitcom lineup I used to watch, Beverly Hillbillies. Although that one I never watched the entire show. And then, of course, other ones that were made when I was growing up, you know, like Fresh Prince. Years later, Everybody Loves Raymond, which, look at it from there. Now, that being said, when I heard that Rob Zombie, a fan of classic horror, and based on his directing style, really the grindhouse and a little bit of classic horror, was going to be doing a reboot of it, I'm like, oh, this could be interesting. I mean, it's not going to be R-rated, so he's going to have to be a little bit more creative, especially if he is the one who is writing and directing it. Now, just checking real quick. Yes, he did write it, so you know he's not going to be able to drop that many F-bombs or whatnot. And then the trailer dropped. Now, my anticipation went down a little bit, but I'm still going to give it the benefit of the doubt, because we all know there have been good films that some of the hype was killed by bad trailers. And it did give away some of the plot, or what I assume was going to be the plot. I'm like, alright, Count doesn't want his daughter going along with Herman, so go from there. And I wasn't surprised that a lot of my fellow Munsters fans did not like the trailer, so that didn't surprise me. Now, getting into it, I sat down yesterday, watched it on Netflix, and at the end of the day, the film is, I mean, it has some decent moments, but overall, it feels like a wasted opportunity to reboot this series. I will say Rob's direction, as in how he uses the camera, and a little bit with some of the actors, the lead ones and a couple of the background ones, is not the main issue here. I'd say the main issue when it comes to Rob here is more the scripting process and not the directing process. I'm going to specify the separation in that. Because that's one thing I notice sometimes people don't do when they talk about someone who's a writer-director and they're critiquing their film, is like you got to separate both of them to a point, because since they're the one in both spots, there's going to be some of that crossover. But when the complaint comes from one thing, like you could have a writer-director that has an excellent script, but then for one reason or another, either they just phone in the direction or they're not the best director. The technical aspects hurt the film. Now, it doesn't say what the budget was for this film, but that is one of the things that goes a little bit with Rob's direction that really does hurt the film, is that there are moments where you can tell they were not given the best budget. Now, some of it adds a little bit to Rob's choice of surrealism, which I'll get to that in a bit. But the thing with the writing that really does hurt it is, one, it's supposed to be a comedy, and there wasn't a lot of moments that I really, really, really laughed. I mean, there was a couple moments where I chuckled, but then there was one moment near the end of the film involving the character Igor where, because of the joke, I really did laugh. But it's one of those lowbrow jokes that you expect in Rob Zombie's one, but you had to get real creative with it. But the way they put it in there, I'm like, okay, Rob, you got me with that one. That one I'll give. I'm not going to spoil it for those of you who haven't seen the movie. Let's just say it involves Igor looking for another job. And with how it's paced and everything, and the fact there's not really a lot of big stakes in the film, it feels like an overly long episode of a sitcom, which I kind of get. And if Rob is as big a fan of the original original show as he says, I can kind of see why he went in that direction. But here's the thing. That's if you were trying to make it as in like a reboot to redo a new series. When you're rebooting it as a film, you gotta really go at it from a different angle. There has to be some kind of stakes involved. And Rob kind of fails there. But I'll say, even with that failure, this film, unless you're really a big, super fan of the show and really you're gonna hate Rob for doing that, it's harmless. It's just, like I said, a wasted opportunity from Rob there. And by overly long, in case you're wondering, it's 110 minutes, so just a hair under 2 hours. There's no reason, with how meandering this film is, for this film to be that long. It probably should have been 90 minutes at most with this type of thing. Now, the cast is, we got Jeff Daniel Phillips playing Herman, and then he also plays the roles of Shecky von Rathbone and Zombo. We got Sheri Moon Zombie as Lily, which, of course, we got to have her in there. You got Daniel Roebuck as the Count, Lily's father. Which, of the three, he definitely feels the one who's the closest to channeling the spirit of the characters as they were in their original incarnation. I mean, there's that whole thing with the mustache that some people were talking about, but I don't mind the mustache with how theatrical it is. It does seem like it would fit the character. Just the way that Daniel, some of his enunciations and how he carries himself, I'm like, yeah, I buy this as the Count. I mean, you're not going to fully capture the spirit of that, but I think it's pretty close. We got Richard Brake as Dr. Wolfgang, who is Herman's creator, and he also plays the character Orlok, which was a nice little touch I like that he threw in there. Having a Nosferatu type vampire and actually name him after the name they had to call the character in the original subtitles, Orlok. And then, of course, Sylvester McCoy plays Igor. And I know some people will say, oh, it's a wasted role for him, but hey, he got one of the few laughs I got out of the film, so I'm going to praise him there, just the way he did it. And if I remember right, in the original series, Igor was just a bat. Which, of course, I kind of figured, there's going to be an explanation for why he's a bat by the end of this film, and it is. And it is in true fashion in keeping with the Count as a character, so there was that. We got Dee Wallace as the Good Morning Transylvania announcer. You got Pat Priest in there. You got a Butch Patrick. We all know that Captain Spaulding himself probably would have made a cameo if he was still alive, but it's like, what would he have been? Now, the plot is mainly set in Transylvania, but by the end of it, the Munsters have transferred over to sunny SoCal, where I live. It begins with Dr. Wolfgang and his assistant Floop robbing graves and stitching together bodies. And I would not be surprised if I was not the only one who's about to make this comparison with this. But a lot of the moments involving Wolfgang bringing the creation to life and it being a failure at first kind of felt like the off-brand Young Frankenstein to me. Like, if you want to buy Young Frankenstein, I want to buy Young Frankenstein. We have Young Frankenstein at home. Young Frankenstein at home. And, when they get the body and is expecting Floop to go, could be worse. Could be raining. Instead of black and white, it's in Technicolor. And then, of course, the whole thing with him being a failure and all that, and then the whole thing of getting the wrong brain. That's probably one of the few little things in this whole situation that okay, I can forgive that one, since this is supposed to be a reference to the original, just like in Young Frankenstein. So, them getting the wrong brain, and instead of it being the brain of a genius, it's the brain of a failed stand-up comedian. That I don't mind. And it adds a reason for why Herman is the way he is here. Now, like in Young Frankenstein, which continue that whole thing, Henry wants to show off his creation, but instead of live on stage for one night, it's on Transylvanian TV. So everyone sees that he got the wrong brain. But Lily is smitten with this. I mean, she's been on a few failed dates, one of which, of course, is with Orlok, which you see in the trailer. I gotta go. Okay. But there's a lot more context behind that I gotta go in the film, and when you see it, you're like, ew, yeah. I don't blame you, Lily, for running for Orlok. He's not the type of guy you'd want to marry, despite what the Count is saying. And she goes and meets Herman, and they actually take a liking to one another. She actually does find him charming and does find a sense of humor a little endearing, even if he is a little full of himself because of the whole thing involving the brain. And when he tells, there's a couple of jokes he tells that are funny. A couple of them are oldies, but then other ones are like, that's not really that funny. How's that funny? So that one scene in the trailer where we see the Count go like, oh, that really does sum up a lot of Herman's humor where he thinks he's funny. And of course, bringing sitcom thing, the line that Marie says to Ray in one episode, I think you're the only one that thinks you're funny. That really does fit Herman as a character here. I think he's the only one who thinks he's funny. And like we see in the trailer, they do end up married, and of course Count, is not going to like it, but he's going to go along with it for now. Now, based on the trailer, I, like a lot of you, assume that the whole subplot was going to be the Count trying to get rid of Herman either before or after the wedding. But alas, there's not really a lot going on in that. I mean, the first half of the film is Herman's creation, him meeting Lily, them going out a bunch of times, and the marriage. And there is a little subplot that goes into the final part of the film, and this is the closest the film gets to a conflict, but it's not really a true conflict as it involves the sub-characters, and it never comes up in a way where they can save themselves. And that is Lily's older brother, Lester, who is a werewolf, which explains, of course, Lily and Herman's son later. He's in deep with a character whose name is Zoya, who is obviously a reference to the gypsy character from the Wolfman, even down to having a henchman named Bela. Of course, just like Bela Lugosi's character in the Wolfman. And they're really trying to finagle out of him, and apparently Zoya used to be married to the Count, so there's that little bit of there. And the whole thing about her getting Lester into debt was a little bit of revenge, but also to get her hands on the Count's estate, because her idea is to turn the Count's house into a casino. Casino in Transylvania. Definitely would get the horror fans running to go gamble in Transylvania. Now Lester, despite being the older son, he can't really get into it, so he's looking a way to try to do it. And how does he do it? Well, on the wedding day, he decides to trick his dunce of a brother-in-law into signing over the rights to it. And he does, and they don't really get a solution to it. It involves them trying to stop the sale. Now, if they were trying to stop the sale from going in and failing, and then maybe the mob, or an angry mob showed up, something like that, then I could kind of forgive it a little bit, but they don't. Which is why it feels just like a wah, wah, wah. But it explains why they decided to move, and they moved to SoCal. Now, they arrive on Halloween, so they're liking everything. Now, this is another one of the moments I got a little chuckle out of, because at first they're like, oh, it's not so bad here. We're going to fit in just fine. And then, they win a Halloween costume contest, but it's the next day when they see everybody normal that they're like, If you remember how their attitudes towards normal people were in the original show, it's kind of the beginning of that, where if you look normal, to them you're hideous, or don't let their looks, do not be dissuaded by their horrible looks. I mean, there was that whole thing about the niece Marilyn, that whole thing. Now they're a little bit more over the top with it here, but that's because they're like, we got to be around normal people. Oh no, normal people frighten them, which given how if the history of this world is going to be similar to how it is in the Universal series, and centuries, if not millenniums, of normal humans attacking monsters, you can't help but understand why. But they're going to have to make do with it, especially since Lester does actually have a last-minute face turn where the money he got from the sale, he made a killing in Vegas, which of course one of the few cities where no one will question him always. He's looking like a werewolf. They would say it's probably his business gimmick. And he's given Herman his end of it, so they're now rich. They never actually state the amount, but now they're rich, so now they're going to be good. Now, whether Herman, I don't know if they'll ever do a sequel to this one, but now that they're rich, we don't know if Herman will work, but I have a feeling he will, just to pass the time. I would. Now, as for how I've gone talking about it, you can see what more why I'm saying it's like an overlong sitcom episode and why it's decent and, at least for me, harmless. Other fans, I could see them not liking it, and to the point where they're like, screw this movie. Rob Zombie, screw this movie, screw you, and screw Netflix for making me watch it. But for me, it's just a harmless one. I mean, if I'm going through the films in there and it happens to be there, and I'm like, I'll go through there and watch it. Now, as I've described the plot, you can probably already see what my big negatives on it are. Mainly the lack of conflict and all that. Now, the film should have been filmed in black and white. If you're going to do a tribute to the original show, do it in black and white. I know the reunion film, Munsters Today, and the made-for-TV movies are not in black and white, but I feel that in order to capture full the essence of it, it should have been in black and white. The problem there is apparently the producers didn't let Rob film it in black and white, which is a shame, because he probably would have been able to light it pretty well. Now, to compensate for that, that explains some of the zanier direction choices stylistically, which some of them work, some of them don't. Now, and also I heard he had a lower budget than he wanted, which also explains some of the creative choices, like during the car scenes and some of the other scenes involving the zany, semi-psychedelic backgrounds, which that's going to be a like it or hate it thing. Me, I don't mind it, but I would rather have the black and white over that. And of course the makeup effects I do like. I mean, the updated ones on them, mostly the Count and Herman, look good. Lily, there's not really a lot of makeup job, it's just the wig and all of that. Other than that, there's not really a lot of makeup on Sheri Moon there. You know, Lester is the werewolf, all the citizens of Transylvania. And they're done in a way that it's a little campy, if I can be forgiven to use that term, but it fits the spirit of it. But like I just mentioned, they probably would have looked a lot better in black and white, which goes to another thing. Some people are going to go, why is Herman green? Isn't he supposed to be gray? I mean, he's gray in all the other color ones. I think they went with green as another Frankenstein tribute because of the whole thing about Jack Pierce's makeup supposedly being green, so it fits. Even though the promotional poster, he's gray. Make up your mind. I think it also goes a little bit better if you're going to use all that color in your cinematography. Green would probably focus better, which is probably why they went with that shade of green. I mean, you probably could have found a shade of gray that would have went, but it probably would have stuck out, especially since you already got gray with the Count, so I guess they also wanted another little contrasting, a little bit of contrast there thematically with the color. Now, acting-wise, like I mentioned, the Count's probably one of the better ones, so there's not really much else to toot his arm. Sylvester does what he can with his material. He gets one of the laughs out of me, like I said. Jeff Daniel Phillips is Herman. It's definitely different than what we've seen before. I mean, it's not going to be as memorable as the original. It's kind of hard to top that one. And even the 90s one, while it didn't top it, at least paid loving tribute to it and probably has one of the funniest lines in Munsters history. You get much call for that? No, the Internal Revenue Service pretty much has that covered. Here, this Herman's a lot more annoying, so you definitely understand why the Count does not want him hanging around. But he's also still young-ish, even though his brain and all that's developed, he's still young, so a lot of the stuff he's trying to learn, but at the same time, he's not as endearing. I mean, he has his moments. There's like a few moments, but most of it you're looking at it and go, what the hell does Lily see in this guy? But then again, it goes with the whole sitcom trope of the lovable, to a point, doofus who gets the hot wife. I know some people are going to go, well, that's the only reason Rob put his wife in there. Well, yeah, he always puts her in there. We know that. And as for Sheri Moon, I mean, I would say she's definitely not the best actress in the world, but I've never really had a problem with the roles that she's been in. Like, I didn't mind her in the first two of the Firefly movies, you know, House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects. I didn't mind her there. I didn't mind her in the first Halloween that he did. I haven't seen the second one in a while, so I don't know what my thoughts on that is. I haven't seen the other ones where she's a lead character in here. I mean, she could have been better as Lily, but she's not god-awful terrible. The thing is, you can definitely tell she's trying to channel the original Lily, but she's not doing the best job. That's probably why you needed a more experienced actress if you're going to go that route. Although, say, when it's the physical aspect, like when they recreate the original opening one, you can see there's shades of it there, but it doesn't fully look like a duck, if you want to get my meaning. And the supporting characters, Richard Brake, he does a good job as both Wolfgang and Orlok. Uh, Jorge Garcia as Floop, he's decent. Catherine as Zoya, she does a decent job. Like a lot of the supporting cast do a good job. It's just there's nothing really much to run home about, to talk about. It's when you watch a movie called The Munsters, you go in there with that one, which by the way, that's one of the grown bits of humor I'll throw in there, and the whole thing about where the name comes from. It's a pun on monster, and also they reference the cheese. When I saw that, I'm like, oh yes, that's good writing. Which is, I'd say, the biggest sin about this movie. If this movie got a lot of laughs out of me, I could have forgiven it a little bit more, it being basically just like an extended sitcom episode. But the fact that it did not get a lot of laughs out of me, that's one of the things that's the most unforgivable. You can forgive a film that's meant to be horror or a serious drama that unintentionally becomes a comedy, like The Wicker Man. You can forgive that because you're still enjoying it for a completely different reason than what they intended. But when it's a comedy that's not funny, yeah, that's where it goes. There it is. But even with that, like I said, I mean, there are worse films to watch. Other than like certain situations, I don't see myself watching this one again. Other than like to kill time, or if I'm doing a Munsters marathon and this is at the very end of it. If they do make a sequel to it with Rob at the helm, hopefully they do fix some of these issues, but I highly doubt they are going to be. But who knows? I mean, films with mixed criticisms have gotten that before, so maybe if they do and they give him a bigger budget, he actually does fix a lot of the stuff. Now, I could say if this is a film that I paid to see in theaters, I'd probably be a little bit more annoyed, but it's all for free on Netflix, so my annoyance level on that goes down a little bit. But just a little bit. And that's really all that's left to say about this film. I mean, probably covered all the points, and I didn't even do my notes for this one. I'm like, frick, I'm not going to do notes for this one. Just do off the cuff like I used to do back in the day. And as you could probably already guess when I talk about it, this does not get the Mar stamp of approval or the Mar recommendation thing. With one caveat. Only if you are morbidly curious as a Munsters fan. That's the only way I could recommend you wanting to watch this one. Or you want to do some type of weird drinking game. You come up with it yourself.